Okay, guys, welcome. Today we're going to talk about using the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. Now, the nice thing about the quadratic formula is that you can use it to solve any quadratic equation, right? So if you can't use factoring, or if you don't remember how to do completing the square, the quadratic formula is it's a solution that you can memorize that will always work, right? So as long as you have everything by itself on one side, right, you have ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And usually we make it so that a is positive, but it doesn't matter too much. Then you can say that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. And this will always work. This will always give you both or the only solution for the quadratic equation. All right, so let's do a couple of examples of that. So again, I'm just going to write this up here so that we have it. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So now in part A, we have a 2x squared minus 3x minus 3 is equal to 0. Right, now if you were to try to factor this, if you did 2 times negative 3, you would get a negative 6. And you can't find two numbers that multiply to negative 6 that would add to a negative 3, right? So you'd have to try something else. So here we're going to use the quadratic formula. So here your a is 2, that's what's in front of your x squared. Your b is negative 3, that's what's in front of your x. And your c is negative 3, that's your constant. So now if we plug this into the quadratic formula, we get x equals negative b, so a negative 3, so a positive 3, plus or minus. Now b squared is a 9, minus 4 times a, so times 2 times c, so times negative 3, all over a 2 times a, or 2 times 2. So now we have a 3 plus or minus. Now this number here inside the parentheses, if I have a negative 4 times 2, that's a negative 8, and then times negative 3, that's a plus 24. So 9 plus 24 will give me a 33, and then over a 4. So it looks like we get a 3 over 4 plus or minus square root of 33 over 4. All right, so that's our answer for part A. Okay, now in part B, we don't have everything completely by itself yet. All right, so let's move the 2 over. That's the easier way to do this. So now we have negative 5x squared plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. Right? So it looks like we're going to get that we have a, so just to be careful here, a is negative 5, b is a 3, and c is a negative 2. Right? So it looks like we're going to get that x is equal to a negative b, so negative 3, plus or minus b squared, so 9, minus 4 times a, which is negative 5, times c, which is negative 2, all over 2 times a, or 2 times negative 5. Okay, so now once we simplify, we're going to get negative 3 plus or minus, and then we're going to get a 9, and then we'll get a plus 20 times negative 2, so minus 40 over negative 10. So once we separate this and simplify, we're going to get a 3 over 10 plus or minus, right? 3 over 10, because negative over negative will become positive. And then the inside of this square root will give us a negative 31. So we're going to get a square root of 31 over 10 times I. Right? And I could say that it's negative 10, but since I'm doing plus or minus, I don't really need to worry about that. Okay, so that's my answer for that one. Whoops. Okay. Now part C, we have x squared minus 8x is equal to negative 10. Right? So now let's move the 10 over. and we get x squared minus 8x plus 10 is equal to 0. So now here, a is 1, b is negative 8, and c is 10. So now if we plug this into the quadratic formula, we get negative 8, so positive 8, plus or minus. Now negative 8 squared is 64, and then minus 4 times a, so 1 times c, which is 10, over 2 times a, which is just in this case 2. So now if we simplify, we're going to get 8 plus or minus, and we're going to get a 64 minus 40, so that's a 24 over 2. And now we can do some simplifying here because we're going to get 8 over 2 plus or minus, and we'll think of square root of 24 as square root of 4 times square root of 6 over 2. And once we cancel, we're going to get 4 plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2, so they cancel, so we get square root of 6. Okay, so that was a cool example. Part D, we have a 4x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0, I think it was. Yep, okay. So now in this example, we have that a is 4, b is negative 2, and c is 1. So now plugging this in, we're going to get that x is equal to a negative b, so a negative 2, so a positive 2, plus or minus b squared, which in this case is 4, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times a, or 2 times 4. So now if we simplify, we're going to get a 2 over 8 plus or minus, and then let's see, inside the square root, we're going to have a 4 minus 16, so a negative 12. So this now is going to become a 1/4 plus or minus. Now we can think of the negative coming out giving us an I, and then we can think of 12 as 4 times 3. So now we're going to get 1/4 plus or minus, and then square root of 4 is 2. So this is going to cancel with this and give me a 4 down here. So we get a square root of 3 over 4i. Okay. And then finally, I believe there's one more, right? Yeah, part E is 2x squared minus 2x minus 1, I believe it was. Minus x minus 1, sorry. Okay, so let's give myself a little more room. Okay, so now here A is 2, B is negative 1, and C is negative 1. So if we go to our formula, we get a negative B. So a negative 1 is a positive 1. Plus or minus B squared is 1. Minus 4 times A times C, which is negative 1. Over 2 times A, which is 2. So we're going to get a 1/4 plus or minus, and then inside the square root, we're going to get a 1. Let's see, minus 8 times the negative 1, so 1 plus 8, so a 9. Oops. Over 4. So it looks like we're going to get 1/4 plus or minus 3 over 4. So it looks like we're going to get a 1 and a negative 1/2. All right, so that's that one. And of course, this one you can see that you could have factored, because if you do 2 times negative 1, you get negative 2, and you could use negative 2 and positive 1 to factor that, right? Now, one last comment before we wrap this video up is that usually we only use the quadratic formula when previous methods don't work, right? As you can see, it can be quite a bit of work to sort of work all that out, right? So usually we only use the quadratic formula sort of as a last resort. Okay, so that's just the final comment I want to make. Okay, so that concludes this video on the quadratic formula. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.